Well guys, 2025 is officially here. 2024 was by far the best year for this channel. I reached 1,000 subscribers, the support for the channel has been huge, and my animation skills improved significantly. Not to mention, this year will be Party TV's 5-year anniversary. What will I do for this anniversary? I don't really know yet. If you have any suggestions, let me know in the comments. But anyways, it's that time of the year again, where I look back at all the shows I reviewed this year, and rank them from worst to best. However, I reviewed a lot of shows this year, and I don't have time to cover them all. So I think we need to set a few rules this time around. Firstly, shows that appeared on a top 5 list do not count. The show has to have its own dedicated review to be in this ranking. Also, I can't just include specific episodes of a show, so the top 3 worst and best Spidey episode video doesn't count either. With that being said, let's begin. With all the bad shows I reviewed this year, you may have thought it was hard to decide which one should be at the bottom. Well actually, no, it wasn't even close. It's one thing to bore me to death, it's one thing to annoy me to death, it's one thing to be a terrible influence on kids, but to bastardize one of the greatest kid shows of all time. No, that's where I cross the line. These shorts are awful. The animation is lazy and it gets even lazier every short, the singing is off, and the whole thing just feels like another corporate children's cash grab. They probably made these shorts to honor the legacy of Janice Burgess, the creator who sadly passed away this year, and that's great, but couldn't they put a bit more effort into this? You wanna know why Tasha and Austin don't appear in any of these shorts? It's probably because they could only afford to make 3 character models. This revival is a worthless piece of trash, and I'm glad I don't have to talk about it again. Okay, what I'm about to say might be a bit controversial, but I don't think Cocomelon is as bad as many people say it is. I've heard many stories about kids getting obsessed with Cocomelon and throwing tantrums whenever someone turns it off. Because of this, people generally think that Cocomelon is an awful channel that's turning kids into zombies. I don't personally agree with that. Cocomelon is just like candy. It can be okay as a treat, but when you give a kid too much, they can get addicted to it. It's all about moderation. Most kid shows use super bright colors and repetitive songs that attract kids' attention. Heck, even the shows I watched had those things. I'll make a full video about this sometime in March, but if you don't like Cocomelon, that's fine. But I don't really think it's worth getting upset over. With that being said, the Netflix show, Cocomelon Lane, is garbage. I give it a little credit for trying to teach more social skills than the original, but Jesus Christ is this show annoying. At least with the original Cocomelon, you could argue that it has a small budget, but this is a Netflix show, so couldn't they put a little more effort into the writing? And the songs just go on and on. I couldn't even get past the first episode, it was so annoying. Cocomelon Lane somehow manages to be worse than the original in nearly every aspect. Let's be honest, no one remembers this show. I don't, you don't, nobody remembers it. Heck, for some of you, this might be the first time hearing about this show. This is one of the most forgettable, boring, and unentertaining shows I've ever watched. And considering all the shows I reviewed, that's saying a lot. Honestly, there's nothing I can say about this show that I haven't already mentioned in my previous reviews. It's just a shameless attempt to capitalize on both PJ Masks and Wild Kratts, without having any idea on what makes those shows work. No charm, no effort, this show is just a bland mess with no originality whatsoever. It has nothing to offer, and I'm glad that it's been forgotten about. Some of you probably expected this show to be a lot lower on the list given how harsh I was in my initial review. But in some weird way, I can actually respect this show, not just because the review got a lot of attention on YouTube, but because, at least it tries. Let me explain. We live in an age where executives don't feel like they have to try anymore. They make shows with really bright colors, and interesting characters, repetitive songs, and that's enough to get kids' attention. Little Brown Bear may have terrible characters and messages, but I can give it one compliment, at least it's entertaining. Like Caillou, I can at least give it credit for trying to write a more realistic child character, unlike the other shows which makes their characters these bland little angels who can do no wrong. The show is definitely awful, and the characters are insanely unlikable, but at least it doesn't bore me to death like, say, Spidey and his amazing friends. If this year taught me anything, is to never get my hopes up for a Disney Junior show. Man, I really wanted to like this one. When I watched the trailer, it looked like it could have been fun. But the show is insanely dull. What truly baffles me to this day is the fact that they made Ursula a good guy. Why? I'm fine with a different interpretation of the character, but outright making her a good person who cares about Ariel. No, it just can't work. The sad thing is, I actually like this version of Ursula. She's a genuinely fun character. So they could have made her a completely different character, and nothing would change. Besides that, this show is aggressively mid. I wouldn't call it terrible though, because it does have kind of a cute charm, and there's the occasional, so stupid it's funny, moment, but overall, I couldn't get into this one. I do not have high hopes for Disney Junior in the future. I mean, just look at their upcoming lineup. We have Iron Man and his awesome friends, which is pretty self-explanatory. Then we have Robo Gobo, which might win the Guinness World Record for the most generic kid show of all time. Then there's the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse revival, which is the only thing I'm looking forward to, but knowing Disney Junior, I'm still not getting my hopes up. Who knows, maybe these shows will surprise me, but I highly doubt it. Fun fact: I actually reviewed this show back in 2023, but I forgot to include it in last year's ranking. And there's a good reason for that. I initially gave this show a positive review, but looking back, I'm really questioning what I liked about it because man, is this show dull. It's not exactly a preschool show, but it might as well be because this show is a snorefest. And the dialogue is just painful.
Good thing I brought this tin foil in case we had to wrap a birthday cake.
What? You don't use aluminum foil to wrap a birthday cake? Heck, you don't wrap birthday cakes at all, you put them in boxes. What are you talking about? And if that wasn't stupid enough, in one episode, a giant worm traps our main characters in a magic crystal, and once they escaped, the worm's tummy starts hurting and he cries, which causes the characters to sympathize for him. This is truly the dumbest bullcrap I've ever seen in my life. I'd expect this kind of crap from a show like Bubble Guppies, but there should be more of a standard here. But to be fair, Guava Juice's videos are pretty nonsensical, so I get this is fitting. I do give this guy some credit for bringing his YouTube channel to a television show. In fact, I plan to do that someday, but overall, this show is just bad. Also, did you hear that he quit YouTube recently so he can focus on his personal life? You know what? Good for him. I hope he chooses a better career path. Barney's World is just nothing special. It does make some improvements upon the original, like Barney's design, and the "I Love You" song, but the show is just not interesting. The characters are boring, and the stories are fairly simple. But unlike Bluey, there's no sense of charm or subtlety in the messages. The kids just come across a problem, and Barney, who's more of a plot device than an actual character, teaches them a lesson. Overall, I didn't enjoy this show all that much. It's not awful, but it doesn't stand out as much as I hoped. Man, this season of PJ Masks was just a waste of good ideas. When I first saw the sneak peeks, I was thrilled. But every single mistake that could have been made, was made. The first 10 episodes were a drag to sit through. But by episode 11, things started to get somewhat decent. But the moment the new villain, Gloop the Third, appeared, everything went downhill. Everything in this season felt like such a missed opportunity. That bad asteroid from episode 1 is never relevant again. The characters feel like an afterthought, especially Armadillon, and the new villain has one of the most rushed redemption arcs I've ever heard. Even White Diamond from Steven Universe had a more believable redemption, and that happened in the series finale. Don't get me wrong, PJ Masks is still a great show, and I hope it does get another season, but Power Heroes was just not it. To be honest, I really didn't want to like this one. I mean, a movie about Baby Shark. We already have the dull TV show, we don't need a movie. But surprisingly, the movie is actually pretty above average. There's the occasional funny line, and the villain is great. Don't get me wrong, the movie isn't amazing, far from it in fact. The side plot involving Baby Shark and William's friendship was painfully predictable, and since this is a baby shark movie, you can bet that it has that agonizing song during the climax, but overall, this movie wasn't bad. I actually didn't hate every second of it, which is the biggest compliment I could give to something baby shark related. I usually like to watch shows that are high energy and full of comedy. This show has none of those things, and yet, I find myself really enjoying it. The show is just really charming and relaxing to watch. Normally a show like this would bore me out of my mind, but the show just has a really charming cast of characters. Paddington and his family are really intriguing, and it's nice to watch them achieve their goals. If you're looking for something wholesome and uplifting, this one's worth checking out. While I didn't like the first episode all that much, I gotta admit, the rest of the show is actually pretty decent. It's not amazing, and the characters aren't really that memorable, not to mention their voices are a lot to take in, to put it nicely, but when it wants to, the show can get a bit charming and relatable at times. The songs are pretty mid and forgettable, but I love when the show switches to a 2D art style. But it makes me wonder, why can't the whole show be animated like this? I mean, look at this, it's so adorable. And it fits the kindergarten concept a lot more than the 3D style. Overall, this show is okay. I honestly don't have anything more to say about this show. It's basically just a much better version of Paw Patrol with some likable characters and some fun action. I do like it, but it doesn't really give me much to work with in terms of reviewing. This is off topic, but does anyone else think it's kinda sad that there's been no new original Nick Jr. shows this year? Sure, there was the Dora reboot, but it's based on a classic property. And this show doesn't count either because it was originally on Netflix. Like, did they completely give up? Is what I thought before I saw that there was an upcoming Nick Jr. show named Super Duper Bunny League. I saw the sneak peek, and it looked pretty decent. It's really refreshing to see a 2D animated preschool show. I don't hate 3D, but it's way overused. Let's hope this show is actually good, because as we all know, Nick Jr. has not been doing well lately. As I mentioned before, PBS Kids is currently doing the best in terms of quality kids programming. And this, along with another show that I'll talk about in a minute, is proof of that. Lila in the Loop is pretty darn good. It's not groundbreaking, but the characters have a fun dynamic. Someone commented that the newer episodes are terrible, especially the ones where Lila gets into arguments with her friends. But honestly, I don't mind it. If anything, I actually prefer episodes like this, because it gives the characters more depth, and it stops the show from being too sappy. Overall, I enjoyed this one. This show is a perfect example of how to tackle autism. The main character, Carl, is a kind, somewhat awkward, but generally well-meaning kid with believable flaws. You shouldn't just pretend your autism doesn't exist, but it's good to show how it can affect the brain, and that's exactly what this show does. The show is great at teaching kids that differences are okay and that everyone has their own unique strengths and challenges. Carl's love for collecting and his ability to notice details others might miss are portrayed as assets, and the show strikes a wonderful balance between celebrating his individuality and acknowledging the struggles he faces. I highly recommend giving this show a chance. Look, I know what some of you are saying. Seriously. Bluey's only number 2. It's Bluey. What could be better than Bluey? I know, I like this show as much as the next person, but there's just one show that I like a little more. With that being said, Bluey is a certified banger. But you don't need me to tell you that. There's a bunch of other YouTubers who analyze the show way better than I ever could. In fact, that's the reason why I was so hesitant to review this show at all. I review shows that not that many people talk about, so my reviews can stand out more. But so many people have talked about Bluey that there wasn't anything new I could bring to the table. Also, something that really annoys me is how much this show airs. My younger siblings were watching Disney Junior the other day, and the amount of Bluey that aired is just outrageous. This show airs like 12 times a day, and that's just including the morning block. Heck, the show even airs on Disney Channel outside of the Disney Junior block. It's like Disney is aware that they're incapable of making good preschool shows themselves, so they have to rely on Bluey, which they didn't even make by the way, to make them money. Don't get me wrong, Bluey absolutely deserves all the love and attention it gets. But maybe, just maybe, Disney could try focusing on making their own standout shows instead of leaning so heavily on Bluey. If you went back in time to 2023, and told me that I would put this show in number 1 of my rankings, I would have called you crazy. This is one of those shows where the more I watch it, the more I think about it, the more I end up loving it. The show is obviously a PJ Masks clone, but unlike Spidey and his amazing friends, the show actually does something with its concept. It had a really unique art style, great morals, and most importantly, likable characters. Kia, for example, is kind and likes to help people, but she can also be impulsive and is generally a flawed character. And it's not like the villains are any worse. In fact, Acrobrad might just be one of the most interesting villains of any preschool show. He's actually one of Kia's friends who turns into the supervillain Acrobrad whenever he doesn't get his way. This duality adds a layer of complexity rarely seen in shows aimed at young kids, making him stand out a lot more. In a year where so many kids' shows felt uninspired, Kia and the Kimoha Heroes managed to surprise me with its creativity, heart, and charm. It's proof that even in a crowded genre, a little effort and imagination can go a long way. Hands down, this show earns its spot as my favorite of the year. And that concludes my 2024 rankings. Usually I would come up with some sort of conclusion, but this video took way too long to make. It's currently midnight, and I just wanna go to sleep. So let me know what you think in the comments. And until next time, party on.